University, and myself and my supervisor, Annette Yekler, have been working on a paper titled Thank you. How do household panel members react to multiple requests for different types of additional data over time? So as technologies have become more widespread alongside the general decreasing response rates, individuals are increasingly being asked to do more than just answer questions in surveys, whether that be participation in a mobile app or consent to data linkage. So this begs the question of how best to gather data on different concepts using different methods in a way that sample members will cooperate. So to date, there hasn't been any research investigating the cumulative effects of additional tasks in a panel survey, but rather just the tasks individually. And so we use data from the Understanding Society Innovation Panel. This is a panel of around 1,500 households in Great Britain with refreshment samples about every 3 years. And all those in the household over the age of 15 are interviewed annually. I'd just like to point out that this isn't just an internet-based panel, it's mixed modes. So it includes face-to-face and telephone interviewing as well. So the main aim of the innovation panel is for experimental methods testing. So what this means is that within the annual interviews, there'll be experiments, for example, on question wording. But what it also means is that beyond this, there has been a number of additional tasks that have been fielded, which I will show you later on. So these are the additional tasks. There's 14. And this flowchart just shows what the sample members go through. So the first additional task was implemented in wave 6. And these additional tasks range from mobile apps to biomeasures. Some of them are implemented within or alongside the annual interviews. So the waves there are just a kind of indication of the annual interviews. Others are being fielded in between waves. What you also notice is that the number of people being invited to each task does differ. So this is for a number of reasons. Generally, who's in the panel at the time, but also certain tasks have certain characteristics that sample members have to meet in order to be invited to the task. So for example, for the blood sample and the biomeasure samples, those who are pregnant or breastfeeding or have got a blood clot disorder would not have been invited to the task. So we focus on 3 research questions. The first is descriptive and looks at the patterns of participation across the additional data collection tasks. The second and third are similar, and they look at whether respondents become less likely to participate in additional tasks or the annual interviews, the more additional tasks that they are asked to participate in. So focusing on the first research question, we found that regardless of how many tasks people were being invited to, they always tended to participate in just under half. So the bar chart here shows the mean rate of participation in the additional tasks by the number of tasks invited to. So it tends to be around 40% for each group, some a bit less and some a bit more. As you can see, there's a slight increase in the mean rate of participation by the number of tasks invited to, suggesting that there's selection bias present in the data. And just before I go on to explain that, I just want to note that we did look at other patterns, so for example, by a topic or type of task, but I don't have time to present them today. So going back to this issue of selection bias, which is going to cause a problem for the rest of the analyses. So to explain that more, individuals invited to more tasks are those who have participated in more annual interviews. This is because for a lot of the tasks, in order to be invited to the task, you would have had to participate in the corresponding annual interview. Those invited to more tasks were also those who have not dropped out. So those who have been invited to all 14 tasks have been in the panel since the start and have remained in the panel, whereas those invited to 2 or 3 tasks, they've come into the panel, participated in some, and then dropped out. And so what this means is that those invited to more tasks are potentially more cooperative. So in order to try and control for this selection bias, we run a set of linear probability models on the probability to participate in the task by the number of tasks invited to previously. So we firstly ran an unweighted model as a base model. This found that the probability to participate in the task decreased by 0.1 percentage points with each additional task invited to previously. However, this was non-significant. So we then did a weighted model. This used response weights from the corresponding annual interview, and this found similar results. This was to try and control for selective attrition. Next, we ran a fixed effects model. The reasoning behind this was that as it looks at within variation of within individuals. That means the difference between cooperativeness between people wouldn't matter as much. This actually found a significant positive association. But I'd just like to point out there are a couple of issues with this model. Firstly, it drops all those with no within variation, so all those who participated in all that they were invited to, and all those who didn't participate in any that they were invited to. It also assumes that cooperativeness is fixed within the individual. So hence the fourth model, which used item non-response from the corresponding annual interview to as a time-varying indicator of cooperativeness. But this again found the similar results to the unweighted and weighted model. So our last model, we do an instrumental regression model. We believe that this is the cleanest model, and this is what we kind of go by. So we use sample origin as an instrument. So as I mentioned previously, we have refreshment samples around every 3 years. So this is just the flowchart that I showed you previously, and just shows where the refreshment samples are situated within the panel. And so what we try and do is that we try and use this random variation or exogenous variation in the number of tasks invited to previously to try and control for this self-selection bias. Instrument tests suggested that sample origin was a sufficient instrument test to use in the model. So going back to the table, this found that the probability to participate in a task decreased by 4 percentage points with each additional task invited to previously. It's maybe not good news. And then the final analysis for the third research question looked at the probability to participate in the annual interview using a subset of the models from the second research question analysis for the same reasons. So we firstly ran an unweighted model, and we found that the probability to participate in an annual interview increased by 8.6 percentage points with each additional task invited to previously. Again, this suggests that there's selection bias present in the data. So we next ran a weighted model, again to control for selective attrition. However, this time we had to use enumerated weights rather than response rates so that we could include the crucial cases of those who didn't participate in the annual interview. And this found a significant positive association again, however, it just slightly decreased. So then we run a fixed effects model again so that we could look at within variation. And this again found a significant positive association, but this decreased a bit from the weighted model and the unweighted model. And then lastly, we run the instrumental regression for the same reasons. And again, we believe that this is the cleanest model. We use sample origin again, and this found that the probability to participate in an annual interview decreased by 0.5 percentage points with each additional task invited to previously. And so what we found was that the raw data found mixed results when analysing participation in a task or annual interview and the number of tasks previously invited to. However, taking into account the churn in the sample, so people flowing in and people flowing out, the probability of participating in tasks decreased with each additional task previously invited to, and the probability of participating in annual interview slightly decreased with each additional task previously invited to. So of course, this isn't arguably not that much. However, as this will stack up over time, so as people are being invited to more additional tasks, it then raises the probability or decreases the probability of participating on and on. So what this means is that repeatedly inviting individuals to participate in additional tasks may be detrimental to survey panels. Thank you.